For a lot of these people, it's life changing. Us buying it or not buying it, it's completely different outcomes for their whole life.
There's a lot of different aspects of patience that are required. Um, One, patience with the seller if they're obviously going through a tough time and trying to come to terms with it, or they're trying to come to terms with the dollar amount. They may have unrealistic expectations and being patient with them, coming to those. We obviously, if we can come to an agreement first time we see somebody, then that's ideal. But we also know that that's not always going to happen. We don't try to rush people into something. We don't try to push them into it. Um, think also patience comes in when there's title issues. It could be a probate or it could be a tax issue. We had one property that we bought 2 years after we originally contracted it because the seller had to deal with a bunch of IRS and state tax liens. Well, if we were bugging him, pushing him, being, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this, he would have broken off from us and not sold it to us. But because we were patient with him, he stayed with us and we bought the property 2 years after we originally contracted it. Um, but then there's also patience when you're buying, because everybody goes through waves. They do really well, then they may have a down week, a down few weeks, a down month, and typically people start to get impatient. They start trying to force things. They haven't had a contract in their last 12 appointments or whatever the case is, 20 appointments, and they start getting almost desperate. When that happens, nothing good happens. They're getting emotional in the process. So they're not going to think as well. They're not going to think as clearly. They're not going to think about the seller as much. So they're not going to be pulling the pain out of the seller and finding out what the actual problem is. So I think that is probably the biggest patience thing that I have seen, and I think is important, is having patience in the process and know that you may get 10, 15, 20 no's in a row, but every no is getting you closer to a yes. And averages don't lie. At some point, you're going to get two, three, four contracts in a row, and it'll average out.
I think one of the things that you have to keep in mind, we do real estate every day, day in, day out. A lot of the people we talk to, they're going through something pivotal in their life, something devastating, something they can't come to terms with. That's why they're in this situation. A lot of times, if they're way behind on their mortgage, all they're seeing is they're desperate. They're in this situation like their life is ruined. They have to come to terms emotionally with everything that's going on. And it's hard when you buy so many houses every month and you talk to so many people, like it's just day-to-day stuff for us, but it's not for the people you're buying from. And you have to have that patience and grace with people because they've got to get there on their own. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. They've got to have the want and come to terms and process everything that's going on. Because for a lot of these people, it's life changing. Us buying it or not buying it, it's completely different outcomes for their whole life.